Kalispera σας και καλώς ορίσατε. Madam President, we are honored to have you here for the opening of this forum. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us at what is really the start of the second decade of the Athens Democracy Forum, which we at the Democracy and Culture Foundation convene in association with the New York Times. And we are so lucky and fortunate to have access to beautiful and emblematic spaces like this one. Professor Stambolidis, thank you. It was here, actually, that it all started 10 years ago. And in fact, back then, it marked the 15-year anniversary of Katerina and what was then International Herald Tribune, which has now morphed to the New York Times. And I'm delighted that, again, we're marking the 25th anniversary of that partnership together. So Alex Papachelas, Stephen Dunbar-Johnson, Roger in his place, many happy returns. And thank you for your support. So being the start of our second decade, I reflected on the first decade of the forum. And there are two quotes that our speakers mentioned that have really stuck with me and resonate this evening. Firstly, from Adrienne Clarkson, the Chinese-born migrant Governor General of Canada. And she said, "We are all human, and no one is more human than the other." She was speaking, of course, in the context of demography and migration and geopolitical shifts. But this quote makes me think that the narrative that Putin, Xi, and Modi, with the three big societies they represent, are evil, perhaps implying that others, in the West mainly, are saints, probably needs to change. The second quote that has stuck with me is from the Indian-Singaporean academic Kishore Mahbubani. And he said, democracy cannot be exported. It can only be imported. Perhaps this uncomfortably goes to the heart of some arrogance within the West, which the Munich Security Conference coined with the theme of Westlessness. But let there be no misunderstanding. The legacy of the West has been immense, with brilliant achievements and innovations, many of those even imported and adopted in the countries of China, Russia, and India. Ever since the Renaissance, in many ways inspired by Athens, ancient Athens, many Western values have in fact become global values. But in the age of globalization and what we now call deglobalization, we need to take pause and respect all humans, and these words like inclusivity and diversity need to come into play. So with these two quotes in mind, with the work of their foundation, and having followed Berggruen Institute's Neumer magazine, and their months-long symposium on civilizational states, this leads us to believe that we can no longer talk about the future of democracy without trying to find common ground within civilizational states. Hence, Roger Cohen, the host of Athens Democracy Forum, will get us started with a panel of this straight after President Sakellaropoulou's opening keynote. This evening is about the three C's: civilization, climate, culture. Despite the doom and gloom and the challenges we concentrated on during the last decade, there is lots of innovation around us, and with a good dose of humility, we can dare to hope. Daring to hope is the theme of this year's Athens Democracy Forum as we enter this second decade. This also happens to be the decade of the 20s, so at the Democracy and Culture Foundation, we probably want to make these the roaring 20s perhaps, but of course, learning from history, we want to avoid a Great Depression, catastrophe of world wars by advocating multilateralism and multipolarity to leverage this abundance of innovation around citizen engagement and technology in order to create better governance and well-being. This is the mission of our foundation, to help democracy evolve by empowering society through citizen engagement and better governance. I would like to thank our speakers this evening, but also over the 5 days of this forum. I would also like to thank our headline sponsors, Microsoft, Climate Democracy Initiative, Arizona State University, Taipei University, Taipei Future Consensus Institute, and Google. Also our gold and silver sponsors, EBRD, Libra Philanthropies, Berggruen Institute, and so many others that you've seen and you will see over the next few days. But the biggest thank you, ladies and gentlemen, goes to all of you, coming from so many different corners of the world. So please immerse yourselves in the panels that we have and the networking, and spread the word through social media. Handle Forum Athens, #Athens Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have President Sakellaropoulou with us, who works passionately on civil liberties, on ecological issues, minority rights, better governance, to launch this year's Athens Democracy Forum again. Thank you, Madam President, and ladies and gentlemen, I present you the President of the Hellenic Republic.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the Athens Democracy Forum. As always, this truly important initiative is honored by the presence of numerous internationally renowned speakers. The central theme of this year's forum, Do We Dare to Hope?, focuses on the difficulties that liberal democracy faces today, the resilience it can show in the face of diverse existential threats and dangers, as well as on its future and prospects. It is my conviction that one of the most important challenges for democracy and our democratic system of governance consists in dealing effectively with climate change, which has already taken on the dimensions of a crisis and a state of emergency. The high temperature records we have witnessed this summer, alongside with the wildfires and the recent devastating floods, prove more than ever that the climate crisis is the greatest security challenge of our century. At the same time, it brings our democratic frameworks under severe stress through its impact on food security, migration, water scarcity, biodiversity loss, and natural disasters. The scientific community has warned us of the risks of insufficient preparation. It has also shown that the cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of prevention. We currently know what it requires to face climate change: cooperation, bold financial support, in particular for the most vulnerable, and breaking up our fossil fuel addiction with a quick shift in green energy solutions and more sustainable economic pathways. In the meantime, there is also need to strengthen our capacity to adapt to the devastating consequences of climate change that is already happening by building resilience in our societies, cities, infrastructures, and the productive economic sectors. In Europe, we already have a working and detailed plan, the European Green Deal, which is the roadmap for decarbonizing the economy by 2050, with a parallel commitment to a just transition. Certainly, its success depends on the national government's willingness to follow the path and align their policies with the imperatives of the green transition. Greece is directly affected by the climate change because the Mediterranean is what the scientists call a climate change hotspot. Therefore, it has every interest in advocating for robust measures and in supporting international and regional initiatives. In May 2022, the Greek Parliament voted the National Climate Law, an emblematic text that regulates the transition to climate neutrality. A national climate law is the strongest statement a state can make to show that it can take the goal seriously. However, the importance of climate action has lost its momentum, at least temporarily, in view of the enormous energy security threats currently being faced. While our country had decided to jumpstart its green transition after the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine and the subsequent energy crisis have affected short-term priorities, including delaying coal phase-out or even investing in new fossil fuel extraction activities in order to meet our energy needs. That said, we need more consistency in accelerating the green transition, emphasized by the REPowerEU plan to rapidly reduce dependence on Russian fossil fuels. The climate crisis puts democracies to the test in terms of how to collaborate to protect the public good. The most difficult task when it comes to it is ensuring that all stakeholders participate in the effort. It is not enough for governments or local authorities to take measures on their own, nor for the private sector and organized civil society to merely be aware of the problem. A high level of coordination and mobilization of all actors and citizens in their respective sectors is required. We also need to improve communication between scientists, policymakers, and society. The coronavirus pandemic has shown that we must rely more on scientific knowledge for political decisions. The implementation of these decisions, however, presupposes the cooperation of civil society. In the context of climate change, we must inform citizens why the climate transition is needed and keep them aware regarding the dilemmas that arise in this process. To inform them about the benefits they will gain and how they themselves can also contribute to this effort. For long, we have viewed climate change as an environmental problem, providing for technical solutions. It is now certain that it is also a social problem, where the solutions expand to include economic, political, cultural, and institutional changes. Some of these have the potential for transforming society in ways that address multiple goal challenges related to climate change and resilience building, including poverty and inequality, food and water insecurity, biodiversity loss, and health crisis. Democratic frameworks provide solutions to these problems. Representative parliaments can hold governments to account. Citizens have constitutionally protected rights. Independent media can ensure a free flow of information, and civil society organizations can actively engage in policy making. We live in a democratic system that we cherish and fight to protect. The climate crisis cannot be tackled without raising full awareness and convincing the members of our societies about the urgent character of the situation. This is the only way to overcome the hampering political cost. To achieve this, we also have to think and act in terms of social and climate justice, so that no one will be left behind. The European Union as well must explore new ways to contribute to the green transition cost. The outcome will depend on whether we can implement effective responses to address these issues and offer better security to our citizens. Time is not on our side. we must take bold action immediately. If no drastic response is provided, our democracy will be weakened and the future of the next generations will be seriously undermined. But if we succeed in tackling this challenge on our times, we can certainly dare to hope. Thank you for your attention.